all want to live better. Everybody spends lots of time trying to live their best life. One of the best ways that you can learn to live better is to learn to die better. The human race has been dying for a long time. Isn't it time we get better at this? I didn't always have these beliefs. Oh, no. It took a while. Back in the 80s, I was living in Key West. Jimmy Buffett, Margaritaville. There I was windsurfing on turquoise blue waters. And then my friends started dying of AIDS. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. Death scared me. And as a result, I couldn't be there for my friends. I had no frame of reference for death. I failed my friends. A couple years later, I took a job in New York City. And then the World Trade Center bombing. I lived out in New Jersey, and every day I would drive my car into the city. I'd go past the train station, and I'd see all the cars lined up of the people who had died. Those cars just looked like big, empty coffins to me. Again, death just slapping me in the face, saying, "Wake up." I couldn't live like this. I had to face my fear of death. So I became a hospice nurse. Death is inevitable. Everybody's got one. You can't escape this, folks. It's the coming attraction. Let's make it more attractive. Now, sometimes death can appear very complicated, okay? With medical technology rapidly advancing, we all face the choice of how much is too much in terms of life-prolonging interventions. When are machines and medicines extending life? And when are they extending the dying process? We can't always cure. It's just simply not possible. But we can heal. And part of that healing is a peaceful death. Taking someone off of life support sounds like an absolutely dreadful experience. But it doesn't have to be. I recently had the honor and the privilege of meeting a 29-year-old man we'll call Eric. I removed Eric from life support at the request of his parents. It's hard to believe there was any brightness in this event, but there was. Before I tell you Eric's story, let's take a look at what is life support. How does it work, and does it always support life? Life support is any treatment that keeps the body living without curing or reversing the underlying medical condition. Can all of the major organs in the body be supported? Let's take a rundown. The brain. There is no direct life support for the brain. The heart. We have stimulating electrical devices and pumps and medicines that can keep your heart going. The kidneys. There is a process called dialysis, and this removes the toxins from your kidneys. The liver. There is no direct life support for a failing liver. The intestines. We can artificially feed the gut, but this has nothing to do with the pleasure of eating. And the lungs. There is a machine called the ventilator, and this will help you to breathe when your lungs are too weak to do it on their own. This is the machine that most people think of when we say life support. When you hear the phrase pulling the plug, they're talking about the ventilator. So what does it feel like to be on a ventilator? Well, just clip your nose shut put a straw in your mouth. That is your airway. And you won't be able to swallow your own secretions. So we nurses are going to go in with another machine, and we are going to be suctioning them out of your mouth every few hours. Oh, and you'll need to be sedated, because the urge to push that plastic tube out of your throat is overwhelming. Now, each of these organs has their own specialist doctor. They're like a pit crew in a car race, okay? You got the heart doctor coming in, all right, working on the heart, heart's good, all right, lungs, all right, lung doctor's coming in, lungs, kidney doctor, kidney, dialysis, oops, it failed, kidneys are shot. You see, healthcare is very fragmented, and that's why it is crucial to look at the whole person and think very carefully. Are they living or are they dying? I'll finish telling you Eric's story. One night, Eric went to a restaurant in St. Augustine. And at some point, he left the table. He went into the bathroom, where he overdosed on heroin and fentanyl. The paramedics got to him when he had just a tiny sliver of life left. But sadly, Eric has suffered severe, irreversible brain damage. He will never walk, talk, do anything purposeful ever again. Right now, he is in the intensive care unit of the hospital. He is connected to the ventilator because Eric can't breathe on his own, and he never will, ever again. His parents, Wendy and Phil, are at the bedside. They've been there for the last 11 days since he arrived. And right now, Wendy and Phil are trying to figure out, is he living or is he dying? They've heard all the little organ recital reports from the specialists, and they are desperately trying to figure this out. Wendy looks at her son very, very lovingly, and she puts her hand on Eric's cheek and she strokes it. And then she looks at the ventilator very angrily and says, "This machine isn't keeping my baby alive. He's dying." And in that moment, Wendy and Phil make the most courageous decision any parent can make. They make the decision to remove their son from life support. And this is the bend in the road where nursing is an art and a science. I will be practicing the art of nursing when I care for Eric and his family. I need to know what his passions are so that I can create a sacred space when Eric takes his final breath. His father, Phil, tells me that Southern rock and his 5-year-old daughter, Amy, are his passions. Our social workers made these handprints on a pillowcase, Eric's big hand and Amy's little one. We get the music going. It's Leonard Skinner, Jacksonville, Florida. You know, free bird, yeah, yeah, yeah. I get the lavender diffuser going because I want to make this more of a spiritual moment, not a medical moment. There are chocolate cakes everywhere, all over, all different sizes, because that's Eric's favorite food. I've drawn up the syringes of morphine and Ativan. These are the medicines that will keep Eric comfortable when we remove life support. These syringes are my artist's brushes as I create a peaceful death for Eric and his family. Our volunteers made this beautiful handmade quilt. It's purple and green, it has vines on it, and I present it to Wendy and Phil. They take the quilt and they very, very lovingly put it over Eric's body, and they tuck it in, just like they did when he was a little boy. Right now, Wendy and Phil are at the foot of the bed, and they're holding hands with our chaplain, Tracy. They're praying, and they're crying. And Phil looks over at me, and he says, very calmly and very reverently, "Set my baby free. Let my baby be free." Tammy, the respiratory therapist, and I nod at each other. We know that this intense moment has arrived. The symphony that is Eric's life is about to come to an end. Like the conductor of an orchestra, Tammy checks in visually with everyone in the room. And then she very carefully and very precisely and gently picks up the scissors, and she cuts the ties that are holding the breathing tube in place. And she very gently removes the tube from Eric's throat and shuts off the ventilator. And then we all stop breathing. And then we breathe a collective sigh of relief. Eric is still breathing. He continues breathing for another 2 hours. And we're at the bedside. We're eating chocolate cake, and Wendy and Phil are telling stories. And they tell this story about one time when they took Eric camping, and it was the first time that he built a fire. And he said, "This is the greatest night of my life." And he made this little paper crown, and he was dancing around the fire. "It was the greatest night of my life, greatest night." And we are eating chocolate cake, and we're actually laughing. We are celebrating Eric's life. I'm also counting the seconds between his breaths until there are no more seconds to count. Eric has just died. The walls in the room seem to be moving away, and the ceiling seems to be almost kind of raising. The room feels very, very spacious, and time just slows down. No one speaks. We're standing in sacred space. We leave Wendy and Phil alone for some private time. About an hour later, I walk them out to their car. And we take the long way. We go by the St. John's River. It's lightly raining, and we find a bench. And we sit on the bench, and we feel the rain, and we smell the rain, and we taste the rain. And Wendy stands up, and she throws her arms to the sky and says, "I will never take another day for granted again, not another moment. Life is so precious. Every day, even the bad days. I just wish I didn't have to lose Eric to gain this understanding into life." And Phil says, "The impossible became possible today. My son died a peaceful, dignified death. You didn't just pull the plug. This was about the man, not the machine. You honored the man." Watching someone take their final breath is a beautiful portrait of our mortality, our very limited and fragile human existence. So how can we get better at this? How can we have good endings? Let's start with you and me. This is a living will, and it's a roadmap to the kinds of care that you want and you don't want when you can't make decisions for yourself. It's the greatest gift that you will give to yourself and to your loved ones. And by the way, you don't need a lawyer to fill this out. As my oncologist friend likes to say, you'll be living well when you make a living will. How can we as a society get better at death and dying? Let's start with the education of nurses and doctors. We learn precious little about this in our clinical training. We learn a lot about new technology and medications, death and dying don't fit in with that script. But cultural shifts take time. Childbirth used to be this really cold, sterile procedure, no men allowed in the birthing suite. Oh, no, you to the door. But the midwife movement helped to change that and make childbirth more holistic and family-centered. The hospice movement is opening the door on helping people to view death as just another inevitable change in life. It's not a failure. And maybe we could learn from other countries. At St. Wilfrid's Hospice in Eastbourne, England, they made these really cool beer coasters, and they put them out in the pubs. And it's their belief that you should go to the pub, get a beer, hang with your friend, pick up the coaster, and read these really provocative, deep questions and talk about it while you're calm, not when you're in the emergency room and someone you love is dying. And in New Zealand, I tell you, you gotta hand it to the Kiwis, okay? They're always 3 steps ahead of us. Please, let me introduce you to the Rotorua Coffin Club. Yes, they are building the latest in underground furniture. It is their final work of art. It's a tribute to themselves. All roads in this life lead to death. The choices that you make will determine if that road is tortured and tragic and painful, or is it peaceful and gentle and dignified? My name is Eileen Reeve. I'm a hospice nurse. I help transition people off of life support to a peaceful and dignified death. And I love my job. Thank you.